Ryan Maddox didn't expect to meet a woman like her when he showed up with a toolbox in one hand and a toddler's car seat in the other. "Sorry for the mess," he said, shifting the seat onto the porch with one hand while balancing a bag of diapers under his arm. "My sitter bailed. Again. I just need to fix the cabinet and I'll be out of your hair." The woman standing in the doorway blinked at him, clearly taken aback. She was wearing a sharp black blouse tucked into high-waisted slacks, barefoot but still somehow intimidating. Her hair was in a neat bun, not a strand out of place. The house behind her was stunning, modern, spotless, and way out of Ryan's usual client range. He'd taken the job through a last-minute referral. The lady hadn't even given her name, just an address and a note about a broken kitchen hinge. And now she was staring at his daughter. "This is Sienna," he added quickly, lifting the car seat slightly like it explained everything. "She's 2, she's quiet. I promise she won't." "She can come in," the woman said, stepping aside. Ryan hesitated. "You're sure? I can put her in the truck if—" "I said she can come in," she repeated, softer this time. "It's hot out there." That was how Ryan and his daughter ended up in the foyer of a house that looked like the inside of an architecture magazine. He bent down and unbuckled Sienna, setting her gently on the creamy rug. She toddled toward a low coffee table and sat down with a coloring book he'd packed, quiet as always. "I'll stay out of your way," the woman said, folding her arms. "Kitchen's through there." "Thanks," Ryan said, already moving. "Won't take long." It ended up taking over an hour. The hinge was stripped, and while replacing it, Ryan spotted a leaking pipe under the sink. He couldn't just leave it, not when it would cost her so much more later. When he finally wiped the sweat off his forehead and packed up his tools, he found her sitting on the floor next to Sienna, watching her doodle with a faint smile. "Didn't mean to take up your whole afternoon," Ryan said, "but I fixed the leak too. Hope that's all right." She looked up at him, her eyes a sharp green. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, well, couldn't walk away from it knowing it had flooded your cabinets." He paused, then added, "I'll invoice you for the parts, but don't worry about the extra time." She stood up. "What's your rate?" He scratched the back of his neck. "50 an hour, but honestly, I only charged for the original job." She tilted her head. "That's not enough for what you just did." "It's fine," he said quickly. "I'm just glad it's fixed." She studied him like she was trying to figure him out. "I'm Alessia Orman," she said finally. "You can call me Alessia." He nodded, caught off guard by how normal that sounded. "Ryan," he said. "Ryan Maddox." Her gaze dropped to Sienna, who was now coloring a purple elephant. "She's beautiful." "Yeah," he said with a tired smile. "She's my whole world." Alessia was quiet for a second, then asked, "Do you always bring her with you?" "Only when I have to," he admitted. "Her mom's not in the picture, it's just us." She didn't say anything to that, just nodded once, then walked over to a drawer and pulled out a checkbook. Her pen moved quickly. "Here," she said, tearing off the check and handing it to him. He stared at the amount. "Ma'am, this is way too much." "It's what your work is worth," she said calmly. "And it's Alessia, not ma'am." He looked at the check again, then back at her. "This is like 3 times what I quoted." "Then consider it a bonus for being a good dad." He didn't know what to say to that. 2 days later, Ryan got another call from Alessia. She said she had a few more things around the house that needed fixing. He didn't ask questions. He could use the work. The jobs were always small, tightening a railing, replacing a light fixture, but she always paid more than he asked, and she always offered him water when he got there. And every time, Sienna came with him. He started to notice things. Alessia made Sienna laugh more than most adults could. She always had fresh fruit on the counter, and she'd hand Ryan a cold drink without asking. She never talked about herself much, but her house was filled with signs of success, a sleek laptop always open on the kitchen island, designer handbags hanging by the door, a luxury SUV in the driveway. One evening, after fixing a loose doorknob upstairs, he finally asked, "So, what do you do exactly?" She looked up from where she was tying her hair. "I run a company." Ryan blinked, like, "You're the manager." "I'm the CEO," she said simply, "of Orman Strategies." His mouth parted. That's the company with those tech ads all over downtown." She nodded like it was no big deal. He let out a low breath. Should have known from the house. She smiled faintly. "I don't usually tell people. It changes how they treat me." Ryan looked her in the eye. "I think you're just good at hiding how successful you are." She tilted her head. "And you're not like most people, Ryan." That did something to his chest he couldn't explain. Over the next few weeks, the jobs kept coming, but so did the conversations. They started talking more about single parenting, about life before success, about things that mattered. Ryan learned Alessia had worked her way up from nothing, lost her mom at 17, and never married. And Alessia learned that Ryan worked 3 jobs just to keep Sienna in daycare half the week. That he hadn't dated anyone since his ex walked out when Sienna was 4 months old. That he was exhausted, but still showed up for his daughter every single day. One night, after fixing a faulty closet door, Alessia handed him a sandwich wrapped in foil. "You didn't have to make me anything," he said, surprised. "You didn't have to fix my entire house," she replied, "but here we are." He sat on her back patio while Sienna napped inside, the city lights glowing in the distance. Alessia sat across from him, sipping wine. "You ever think about quitting it all?" she asked suddenly. "Quitting what?" "The struggle." He chuckled bitterly. "Every damn day, but I can't. Sienna needs me." "You ever let anyone help you?" He looked at her. "Can't afford to." She leaned forward, her voice low. "What if you didn't have to afford it?" Ryan froze. "What are you saying?" he asked. Her gaze didn't waver. "I'm saying, maybe I want to help." And for the first time in years, Ryan didn't know what to say next. Ryan hadn't been back to Alessia's place in over a week, not because she hadn't called, but because he'd turned her down. Politely. 3 times. Each time she'd sounded calm, unfazed, but the last time she hadn't called back. Now, standing in the dim storage room of the hardware store, he stared at the cracked screen of his phone, wondering if he'd pushed too far. He didn't have time for confusion. His truck needed work, Sienna's daycare bill was overdue, and he had drywall dust permanently embedded under his nails. Still, he couldn't stop thinking about the way she'd looked at him that night on the patio, like she saw something more than a man fixing broken hinges. "Daddy, I found the paint." Sienna's little voice called out from the next aisle over, and he quickly pocketed the phone and walked toward her. She held up a small can of robin's egg blue, her eyes hopeful. "For the kitchen wall," she said. He crouched beside her. "We paint our own place after we fix other people's, remember?" She gave a tiny nod, disappointed but understanding. The moment passed, but something in his chest settled. He wasn't just working for bills. He was working so Sienna could have a home that didn't leak every time it rained. Later that afternoon, as he loaded boxes of tile into the back of his truck for another job, a sleek black car pulled up beside the curb. He didn't recognize it at first. Most of his clients didn't drive luxury sedans that looked like they belonged on a showroom floor, but when the tinted window rolled down, his breath caught. "Alessia." "You're hard to get a hold of," she said, resting her elbow on the window. "I figured you'd moved on to someone more professional," he replied, brushing the dust from his hands. "Professional's overrated," she said. "I brought you lunch." She held up a paper bag with a folded-over top. He hadn't eaten since sunrise. "You didn't have to do that." "I know, get in." He glanced at the boxes, then at Sienna, buckled in her seat behind him, content with a picture book. "She can come too," Alessia added, reading his mind. "I'm not kidnapping you, just borrowing." He hesitated for a beat, then climbed into the passenger seat. The car smelled like bergamot and leather. Cool air swept over his face as Alessia handed him the bag. Inside was a sandwich, a small salad, and a bottle of iced tea with a label he couldn't pronounce. "Thanks," he said, unwrapping the sandwich. "I didn't know what you liked," she said, eyes on the road. "So I guessed." "You guessed right." They drove in silence for a while. Alessia didn't fill space with small talk. She didn't ask questions she already knew the answers to. When she spoke, it was direct. "I've been thinking," she said, turning onto a quieter street, "about something you said, that you can't afford help." He wiped his mouth with the napkin. "It's true." "What if I offered you something better than help?" He looked at her sideways. "What does that mean?" "I have a property," she said, "in Eastbridge. It's sitting empty, needs some repairs. I was going to sell it, but it's been a headache. I thought, maybe you could move in." He froze. "You're offering me a house." "I'm offering you the chance to live somewhere safe," she said. "You'd fix it up. In exchange, you get a place to stay, no rent, just work." Ryan stared ahead, his jaw tight. "I don't do charity," he said. "This isn't charity." Her voice was firm. "It's a mutually beneficial arrangement." "You don't know me that well." "I know enough," she said. "I know you show up when you say you will. I know your daughter trusts you. I know you fix more than what's broken." Silence stretched between them. After a while, he said, "Sienna's not used to change." "Then we'll make it gentle." He didn't answer right away. They drove until they reached a quiet cul-de-sac. Alessia parked in front of a 2-story colonial with a wraparound porch and ivy climbing the sides. It needed a paint job, and the gutters were sagging, but the bones were strong. "This is it," she said. Ryan got out, helped Sienna down, and walked slowly up the path. The front door creaked open. Inside, it smelled like old wood and time. The floors groaned, and dust floated in the sunlight. Sienna wandered to the window and pointed at the yard. "It has a swing," she whispered. Ryan leaned against the doorframe. "Why are you really doing this?" Alessia walked past him into the living room. "Because I know what it's like to need something solid, and because I don't like seeing good people get swallowed by hard luck." He watched her run her fingers along the mantel. She wasn't wearing a watch today. No jewelry. Just a simple shirt and jeans, her hair loose over her shoulders. She looked like someone else entirely. "All right," he said finally. "I'll do it." She turned to him. "But we do it my way," he added. "Fix every inch of this place. No shortcuts, no handouts." "Deal," she said. "And you don't try to save me." "I wouldn't dare." That night, Ryan carried Sienna into the guest room of the Eastbridge house and laid her on a borrowed mattress. He stood for a long time in the doorway, listening to her soft breathing. Alessia had left hours ago, after they agreed on a timeline for the repairs. Tomorrow he'd start with the plumbing. Then the floors. It would take weeks, maybe months, but for the first time in years, he wasn't dreading tomorrow. He stepped out onto the porch, the air thick with the scent of summer rain. His phone buzzed. One new voicemail. He played it and her voice came through, quiet, unsure. "If this gets weird, you can walk away. I didn't want to wonder what might have happened if I hadn't tried." He stared at the stars, the weight of her words settling over him. He hadn't expected this. Not the house. Not the offer. And definitely not her. Ryan pressed his shoulder against the ladder, steadying it as he reached for the rotting fascia board. The summer heat clung to his skin like a second shirt, sweat dripping down his spine. The Eastbridge house was quiet today. Sienna was at his neighbor's, a retired nurse named Glenda who'd insisted on watching her while he worked. He hadn't wanted to accept, but Glenda had waved him off with a plate of banana bread and told him he looked like he hadn't slept in 17 years. He wedged the crowbar beneath the board and pried until it gave with a sharp crack. Paint chips scattered below. The job was slow, but there was something satisfying about peeling away years of neglect with his own hands. He didn't need to be told what was wrong. He could see it, feel it, fix it. What he couldn't fix was the silence from Alessia. Since the day she'd handed him the keys, she hadn't visited the house once. No calls, no lunch deliveries, no unexpected drive-bys in that sleek car. He hadn't expected her to hover, but the absence felt deliberate, as if she'd stepped back the moment he agreed to stay. Ryan tossed the broken board onto the growing pile and climbed down the ladder. He was wiping his palms on his jeans when a silver SUV pulled into the driveway. Not hers. The door opened, and a man in a pressed navy suit stepped out, sunglasses perched on his sharp nose. He scanned the front yard, then spotted Ryan and approached with sure, clipped steps. "You Maddox?" the man asked, voice clipped. Ryan nodded, wary. "Yes." The man extended a hand. "Nathan Rowe, work with Alessia, she sent me." Ryan didn't take the hand. "What for?" Nathan withdrew it without offense. "I'm here to check in on the property. She asked me to bring by some materials you requested. Also," he reached into the SUV and pulled out a folder, permits for the structural work. She fast-tracked them through the city. Ryan took the folder, surprised. Didn't think the process worked that fast. It usually doesn't, but Alessia has influence, and she's invested in this place. Ryan opened the folder, flipping through the stamped paperwork. Everything was in order. Clean, legal. He looked back at Nathan. "She could have told me herself." Nathan hesitated. "She's been tied up, new acquisition, board's been restless." Ryan closed the folder. "Right." The man studied him a moment longer. "You've done good work here," she noticed. Ryan didn't respond. Nathan gave a polite nod and returned to his car, pulling out of the driveway without another word. That night, after Sienna fell asleep, Ryan sat on the porch, the folder in his lap. The wind rustled through the trees, and the scent of fresh cut lumber clung to his clothes. He stared out at the yard, where the old swing hung from the tree like a promise. The next morning, he drove into the city. He parked in the underground garage he remembered from the first time he noticed her SUV. The building was all glass and steel, towering over the street like it didn't care about gravity. He walked through the marbled lobby, his boots echoing against the polished floor. The receptionist took one look at him and lifted a brow. "Can I help you?" "I'm here to see Alessia Orman." "Do you have an appointment?" "No." She tapped something on her screen, then looked up again. "She's in a meeting." "Tell her Ryan Maddox is here." The woman's eyes flicked over him again, his worn jeans, the faded shirt, the calloused hands. Then she picked up the phone and murmured something quick and low. "She'll be down shortly," she said, setting it down. Ryan stepped back, feeling out of place. Men in tailored suits passed him without a glance. Women in heels clicked past, all confident and efficient. He felt the weight of drywall dust on his shoulders even though he'd showered. Then the elevator opened. Alessia walked out. She wasn't in slacks or silk today. She wore a crisp white shirt tucked into a navy skirt, heels quiet on the marble. Her hair was straight this time, falling to her shoulders. She stopped when she saw him, something unreadable in her expression. "You came," she said. "You sent someone else," he replied. Her gaze dropped for a second, then lifted. "I didn't want to interfere." "You're not interfering when it's your house." She moved closer. I thought giving you space was the right thing. You gave me silence. Her shoulders tensed. I didn't know what this was turning into. Ryan looked at her for a long moment. Neither did I. They stood there, the city humming around them, both of them suspended in something that felt like more than confusion, more than caution. You didn't have to fast-track anything, he said finally. I wanted to. He nodded once, and what else do you want? She hesitated. That's the problem. I don't know how to want something that isn't part of a 5-year plan. I'm not a planned. No, she said, voice low. You're the first risk I haven't calculated. He studied her. You're used to people doing what you say. I'm used to not needing anyone. And now. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Now, I don't know what to do with needing you. The air shifted between them, something unspoken, heavy and electric. I'm not looking for a lifeline, Ryan said. I'm not a project, and I don't want to be fixed. I know, she said, stepping closer. You're the one doing the fixing. He looked down at her, the space between them closing. You want to come by the house tomorrow? He asked quietly. Do you want me to? I wouldn't have come here if I didn't. She breathed in like it mattered. Then I'll be there. Ryan turned to leave, but paused. Bring something you don't mind getting paint on. She blinked. You want me to work? No, he said. I want you to be part of something you didn't build alone. Then he walked back to the truck, the city fading behind him. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in a long time, he wanted to find out. The brush in Alessia's hand hovered above the window trim, the bristles thick with primer. She glanced over her shoulder, watching Ryan crouched on the porch steps, showing Sienna how to snap a chalk line along a wood plank. His voice was low and patient, and the little girl's laugh bubbled up like it belonged here, like she'd always known this place. Alessia turned back to the wall and pressed the brush firmly into the groove. It was the first time in years she'd done anything remotely domestic. Her staff usually handled everything from groceries to dry cleaning. But today, she was barefoot, her sleeves rolled up, and her phone buried in the bottom of her purse on silent. You missed a spot. Ryan's voice cut through the quiet, and she turned to find him leaning against the railing, wiping his hands on a rag. I was letting it breathe, she said. He raised an eyebrow. That your strategy with paint or people? She narrowed her eyes before dipping the brush again. Depends on who's watching. He stepped closer, his gaze resting on her face. You've got primer in your hair. She reached up instinctively, but he caught her hand midair. Here, he said, and gently brushed it away himself. His fingers lingered for a beat too long. I think you just wanted an excuse to touch me, she said, her voice quieter now. I've had better excuses, he replied. They stood there, the scent of wood and paint between them, the air charged but still. Then Sienna called out from the yard, and Ryan stepped back, the moment folding away. Later that evening, after Sienna was tucked into bed in the upstairs room she'd now claimed as her own, Ryan found Alessia in the kitchen, staring into the open fridge. I stocked it, she said without turning. I figured you'd keep forgetting. I didn't forget, he said, leaning against the counter. I just don't usually have time to think about things like fresh basil and imported yogurt. She closed the fridge. You think I don't know what it's like to go without. He tilted his head. Do you? She crossed her arms, not defensive but deliberate. There was a time I lived in a motel with my mother. She cleaned offices at night. I stayed in the lobby and read manuals because we couldn't afford books. When she died, I was 17 and owed 3 months' rent. Ryan's expression didn't falter. What pulled you out? I didn't stop, she said. I got a scholarship, took night classes, built the company from a rented storage unit and a borrowed internet plan. He exhaled, the weight of her past settling into the space between them. And now you build empires. She looked up at him. No, now I build things that won't break when people lean on them. He stepped closer, his voice low. Are you leaning on me, Alessia? I don't know, she said, but I want to. He looked at her for a long time. Then do it. She reached out, fingers brushing his chest, and he closed the distance between them. They kissed, not tentative, not explosive, but deeply certain, like something long overdue. When they finally pulled apart, Alessia rested her forehead against his. I've never done this with anyone who mattered, she whispered. Then we'll take it slow, he said, but we won't stop. Days passed, the house transformed. Ryan replaced the porch steps, sanded every floorboard, retiled the bathroom. Alessia showed up after meetings, sometimes in heels, sometimes in jeans, always with dinner or fresh supplies. They worked side by side, fell asleep on opposite ends of the couch, and woke up tangled together before Sienna stirred. One morning, Ryan found a manila envelope on the kitchen table. Inside was a contract, simple, clean, with his name at the top. What's this? He asked, holding it up. Alessia sipped her coffee. A business proposal. He raised an eyebrow. You have the skills, she said. I have the resources. We start a property restoration division under Orman Strategies. You run it, your own team, full benefits, real salary, no more chasing side jobs. He stared at her. You want to turn me into a CEO? No, she said. I want to turn you into a man who doesn't have to choose between diapers and dinner. He sat down slowly. This is real. It's yours if you want it. He set the envelope aside and looked at her. I don't want this because I need saving. She leaned forward. I'm offering it because you deserve more than surviving. He didn't answer right away. Then he said, I'll do it, but not because you're handing it to me, because we're building something together. She smiled, and it reached her eyes in a way it hadn't before. That weekend, she brought him to a black tie event downtown, a gala for a children's tech initiative funded by Orman Strategies. Ryan wore a tailored suit she'd had delivered without asking his size. Somehow, it fit perfectly. People stared at them when they entered. Not because she was the CEO or because he clearly wasn't one of them, but because of the way they looked at each other. Like the city around them didn't matter. At the midpoint of the evening, she stepped onto the stage to speak, the room falling silent as she stood behind the mic. I built this company from nothing, she began, but I didn't build a life until recently. I met someone who reminded me that the best things aren't built in boardrooms. They're built with your hands, with time, with heart. She looked out at the crowd, then directly at Ryan. He's not just part of my future, he's the foundation. Applause thundered through the room, but Ryan didn't hear it. He was already moving toward the stage. When he reached her, she stepped down, heels clicking softly. He took her hand in front of everyone. You didn't need a speech, he said. You already had me. She wrapped her arms around him, and they kissed as the cameras flashed. Weeks later, the Eastbridge house was finished. The porch was painted, the swing repaired, and the garden they'd planted together was beginning to bloom. Ryan stood outside with Sienna, watching her chase butterflies in the early spring light. Alessia stepped out, barefoot in the grass, holding 3 mugs of cocoa. Board meeting in 10, she teased. He pulled her into his side. Let's cancel it. She leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder. Already did. They stood there, watching their daughter laugh in a yard that used to be empty, a place that used to echo. Now it felt like home. Alessia tightened the strap of her heels as the guests began to trickle through the grand archways of the Eastbridge house. The scent of white gardenias drifted through the evening air. mingling with the soft clink of champagne flutes and the low hum of jazz echoing from the back garden. Spotlights lined the walkway, casting a warm gold glow over the freshly painted shutters and the trellised archway that Ryan had finished 2 days ago. He stood by the front gate, rolling up his shirt sleeves as he gave last-minute directions to the caterers. His jacket was draped over one shoulder, and his tie was nowhere to be seen, but he looked completely in his element, confident, grounded, and somehow more magnetic in his simplicity than anyone else in the room. Alessia approached him with 2 flutes of champagne. "You're supposed to be inside, pretending to enjoy small talk with venture capitalists." He took one of the glasses, his eyes on hers. "I'm already enjoying the view." She tilted her head. "You say things like that too easily." "I mean them too easily." She glanced around at the gathering. The event had been her idea, a way to announce the launch of the new restoration division publicly and celebrate the house's transformation. But it had become more than that. It felt like a personal declaration that she wasn't just investing in a business model. She was investing in a life. "So," he said, sipping the champagne, "how long before your board figures out that I'm not going anywhere?" She looked at him, steady and sure. "They already know. And they know better than to question me twice." He leaned in, lowering his voice. "That's terrifying and hot. Both are required qualities in this relationship." The rest of the evening passed in a blur of toasts, laughter, and quiet moments where she'd catch Ryan watching her across the room like a man still surprised he got to stay. By the time the last guest had left and the lights had dimmed, Alessia kicked off her heels in the living room as Ryan carried Sienna upstairs, her head nestled on his shoulder, already fast asleep from the excitement. When he returned, she was sitting on the staircase, her legs tucked beneath her, watching the last candle flicker beside the window. He sat beside her, their shoulders touching. "You did it." She shook her head. "We did." He turned to her. "You know what I realized tonight?" "What?" "I've never been proud of where I live. It's always been temporary. Always felt like I was one bill away from losing it. But this house." He looked around, his voice quieter now. "This feels like it's mine, not because of the deed, but because of what we created inside it." She reached for his hand. "It's ours, every inch of it." He kissed her knuckles, then looked at her with something heavier behind his eyes. "I never thought I could have this. A home, a family, you." "Why not?" "Because people like me don't end up with people like you." She leaned in until her forehead touched his. "Then maybe I'm not who you thought I was, or maybe you're more than you've ever allowed yourself to be." He kissed her then, slow and certain, as if he had all the time in the world. And for the first time, he truly believed he did. 6 months later, the Eastbridge house was more alive than ever. The front garden bloomed with wildflowers. The porch swing creaked under the weight of afternoon naps. The backyard echoed with laughter. Sienna's, mostly, as she raced barefoot through the grass with their neighbor's golden retriever chasing behind. Inside, the walls were lined with framed photos. Sienna covered in flour beside Alessia at the kitchen counter, Ryan holding a hammer beside a crooked but charming birdhouse, the 3 of them on the front steps, smiling like nothing else in the world mattered. One Saturday morning, Ryan stood barefoot in the kitchen, flipping pancakes, while Alessia read the newspaper out loud in a robe that belonged more to him than to her. Sienna sat at the island, swinging her legs and drawing hearts with a red crayon on the back of a cereal box. Alessia lowered the paper and eyed the stack of pancakes. "You've improved." "I've had time to practice now that I'm not working 80 hours a week." "Imagine what else you'll master by next year." He turned toward her, setting the spatula down. "Actually, I had a thought about next year." She raised an eyebrow. "Is this about the upstairs bathroom again?" "No," He walked around the island and pulled something from the drawer behind her. A small velvet box. Alessia froze. He opened it slowly. Inside sat a ring, simple, elegant, a single emerald-cut diamond with 2 tiny sapphires flanking it. Not flashy, not overdone, just honest. Ryan, I know you don't need anything from me. Not a name, not a title, not a promise. You've built your life without anyone's help, but I want to build the rest of it with you. Not just in this house, not just in business, in everything. She stared at him, hands trembling slightly. You're serious? I've never been more. She looked toward the staircase, where Sienna's red crayon drawing still rested against the wall. A family. 3 stick figures holding hands beneath a sun with a huge smile. Then she looked back at him. Yes, she said, voice thick with emotion. It's always been yes. He slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. That night, after Sienna had fallen asleep wrapped in a blanket on the couch, Ryan carried her upstairs while Alessia turned off the lights downstairs. When he returned, she was waiting in the doorway to their room, the hallway bathed in moonlight. They didn't need to say anything else. They were already everything the other had never dared to dream of. And they were just getting started.